Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay in the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
What's up, Knight fans? Welcome to the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. What a week it has been. I am Jeff Sharon along with Eric Lopez. Eric, you got power?
I do. I have power. I have a roof. I am very, very pleased. Overall, I've never been more excited to talk to you in all the years I've known you. Put it that way.
You're in good shape.
Yeah, that's an understatement. I know many are not, so we got to, think that. Certainly be fortunate from that standpoint, and certainly we think of the people that are certainly going through much tougher times than we are. And the babble nonsense we're going to be talking about here about a football game that people will not be played, which some people for some reason are upset about.
Yeah, I know. I'm one of those people who are still feeling the effects of Hurricane Irma. We lost power at about 8 o'clock on Sunday night, just in time to not see the Giant game, which I guess, is not so bad.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a positive, right? I mean, you should be grateful about that. I mean, holy mackerel.
But
wow.
I know, it was bad. But here we are recording this Wednesday night, and so I've been without power for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 72 hours. So still don't have it up in Oviedo. There's a lot of folks around. I think I saw something like 700, somewhere around the neighborhood of 600,000 people around Duke Energy's service area here in Florida don't have power. The reason why this audio quality sounds so bad, and my apologies to the listeners, is because I'm actually recording this in my father-in-law's office. And so I don't have my equipment or any of that. But I have internet access, and I have my laptop, so here's how we're recording. Here's what we've done.
And for the record, I did offer to host the podcast, but you declined.
I couldn't make it down there. But what do you call it? So
I'm not returning the home and home favor, just so you know.
All right, so here's what we have on the agenda. We have a very special interview. We're actually going to lead off with this here in a little bit. Andy Seeley joined us. He's the Associate Athletic Director in charge of communications for UCF. And he was able to at least give us some answers to some questions that we had about UCF football canceling not only the Memphis game, but also the Georgia Tech game and some of the other situations involved. Because we knew that there were a lot of fans who were who have been quite vocal on social media about their displeasure with how it was handled from their perspective. I'm here to tell you, Knight fans, that the word of the week is patience. And so we're very thankful for Andy to come on board with us and give us some insight into what went on. And obviously, this is still a developing story about what's going on with UCF's football schedule. But as it stands right now, the Memphis game got canceled. It was scheduled for last Friday night, and then Memphis was in the air when reportedly the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, decided that all state universities and schools would be closed. Memphis decided when they arrived, they're like, okay, this sounds like a bad idea. We're going to get out of here. And so the game was called off. And then it was determined, we were worried about the Georgia Tech game because we weren't sure, at that time. And I tweeted out earlier the 8 o'clock advisory from Thursday night, which showed the storm heading down our throats. That didn't look good. Storm blows through, and Monday, they decide to call off the Georgia Tech game scheduled for Saturday as well. So UCF goes from 7 home games in a 12-game schedule to 5 home games in a 10-game schedule, at least for the moment. Before we get to Andy, Eric, your thoughts real quick on how things went down and just how this crazy week just unfolded. I think it's the craziest week maybe in the history of UCF sports. What do you think?
It's probably one of the craziest weeks in the history of the state. I mean, Think about what we just we had. This was a storm that a week ago, Wednesday night, everybody assumed was going to the east side of the state.
Right. They were thinking there was a possibility it might miss us to the east.
Correct. Then there was the talk of a direct hit to Miami and South Florida as a Cat 5. It went from that to then, we'll just hit to a West Coast only storm. But then even up to the last hour, this thing went more east inland in the state than anybody even saw, which as a result, the Orlando area got hit harder, I think, than they even thought they would. It saved Tampa and the West Coast there in Florida there, I think, a lot. But nobody knew what the heck was going on with this storm. The meteorologists got absolutely schooled by this storm. They got all their models and everything. It was all wrong. And so with all that going on, you're trying to make decisions on things that are the unknown. First with Memphis, we'll go chronological. Look, I think obviously they moved the game to Friday. I think they could have played the game on Friday. I know a lot of people obviously are going to blame Memphis for this one and Mike Norville for, I think, canceling the game on their side. I'm getting some of the speculation out there that's been floated out there that once Governor Scott came out with the ruling there about all schools being closed, that they got on the plane, and then once they landed, they just made a phone call and all that. Here's the thing. I think the game could have been played, obviously. Could have been played Thursday night, Friday night. They chose not to. I understand why Coach Norville might be concerned. Think about this, and you know this, Jeff, because you've lived outside the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. If you live outside the state of Florida, the information you're finding out, what are you watching? You're probably watching the Weather Channel. Well, as you know, the Weather Channel will exaggerate some things and say, not on, they're going to blow this thing up as, what it is. So you're not really sure if you're an outsider and you're coming into this state and everybody's telling you about this monster hurricane that's coming. You land, you find out that the governor has ordered every school to be closed and everything. You probably wouldn't be real thrilled to be there right now, regardless of what you've been told. So I think that's what happened. I think Memphis probably said, I don't really feel comfortable playing here. They probably called some higher-ups. And at the end of the day, the game got, canceled. Basically like USF and Connecticut, by the way, which originally was scheduled for noon on Saturday in Connecticut, then got moved to 10:30 in the morning because USF was concerned about getting back to Tampa and everything. And then they finally, again, canceled it. So a lot of people were getting nervous here. So I think I don't think UCF did anything. No, there's nothing they could have done there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
They
Not to mention
everything
the fact all the other state schools had their games canceled, and so did the Tampa Bay Miami NFL game that was going to kick off the season.
Correct. The one thing I would question Memphis is that's the case is why didn't because I was told from various people that Thursday night was on the table. Remember, UCF and Memphis both played on Thursday. Mm-hmm. So they would have both had a week to play on that Thursday. Memphis refused. That's what I heard. And as a result, they came down to Friday. So to me, that's where I would kind of say, well, why didn't you guys agree to play on Thursday when you would have been way fine at that point? All right. So that happens. Now let's move to the weekend. The storm's going west towards Tampa. Everybody thinks it's going to hit the coastlines. And then, I remember, Jeff, and I remember there was a moment in the coverage. I forget what time it was because, they're all the same. There was a moment where the storm was kind of stopped in Cuba, and it was going like 6 miles an hour. And I remember some of the local meteorologists, Tom Sorrells, as a matter of fact, that KMG was the first to bring it up. He's like, that's odd that this storm just stopped, basically. And the concern was, what if this thing maybe goes north, which nobody's expecting?
Like due north, towards Orlando.
Correct. Not northwest or west-north. No, like north. And that's exactly what kind of happened. This thing went more inland completely than anybody expected. So all of a sudden, you got more damages, I think, and I've talked to people. There's more damages in this area, I think, than some people even realize.
Yeah, especially on the west side, like you talk about, like Lake County, places like Mount Dora and
Absolutely.
Polk County and Leesburg and up there, they weren't expecting, and those guys more or less got a direct hit from this thing. And it's hard for us to forget, but this was a statewide disaster. This was a massive storm in terms of square area, and there was significant damage, power outages, and flooding everywhere from Key West and Marco Island, where it made landfall, all the way up to Jacksonville.
It's a different hurricane than we're used to. Usually a hurricane is a specific part of the state, so therefore you can move somewhere else, right? Like Hurricane Andrew was a South Florida hurricane. It didn't affect Central Florida or other areas as much. Charlie, for example, 2004 was more of a Central Florida hurricane. So in other words, you could have moved other places. This one you really couldn't move. That was the problem.
Right.
I mean, I feel like, Jeff, like the entire state's in our backyard that didn't leave the state because, let's be honest, a lot of people fleed the East Coast. A lot of people fled South Florida, and then a lot of people fled the West Coast once they thought, oh, this storm's coming here, and guess where they're going? If they're not leaving the state, they're coming to us. And I know this because I looked into it on the weekend. There was not a hotel to be found. Not one.
Yeah, a lot of folks from South Florida came up here, and then they ended up in the crosshairs anyway.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of this as we're going through the hurricane on Sunday night, as the winds are howling on my window, and I'm thinking, will my roof hold on? All right, well, my whole roof that got damaged a little bit by Matthew last year, will it hold on? And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, this Georgia Tech game isn't going to get played, is it? And I was proven correct. And look, I mean, obviously Scott Frost, as we'll hear from as well, we have Danny White audio on this edition. The players wanted to be with their families, and at the end of the day, who the heck is going to tell them no? And we'll get into all that, but I'm not surprised that this game is not being played. I don't think this game would have been able to be hosted by UCF. Forget the fact, and I'm sick of people. I don't want to hear about, why did the UCF have to host, the guards, the National Guards? That is not the nobody should be criticizing that. I'm literally appalled by that. I'm offended by it as somebody. I think that's a great thing. So let's stop with that negative nonsense. I think there was a lot of logistical things. Yes, lack of practice time is one of them, and that is important. And I think at the end of the day, there was just a lot of things that just wasn't going to be good, and we'll get into. So here we are.
All right. We're going to get into that in a little bit. We'll get to the sound from Danny White and Scott Frost in a little bit. But first, we're recording this on Wednesday night. Earlier today, I spoke with Andy Seeley from UCF, who, again, I'm very thankful for taking time out of his unbelievably busy schedule right now as UCF is trying to balance so many plates and trying to get the campus back together and then later on figure out what to do with football. Andy was kind enough to join me this morning, and here is that conversation that I had with Andy Seeley. Andy, what's going on, man? How's everybody doing on your neck of the woods? You got power yet, or what?
Yeah, my wife and I were texting back and forth last night, and we were talking about booking a hotel room. And I told her, I said, as soon as we book that hotel room, we're going to get power back on. But if that's the case, then let's do it. And sure enough, she booked the hotel room, and 10 minutes later, we got power. So it was a good night in the Seeley household.
That's good, man. That's good to hear. Glad everyone's doing all right. So let me ask you about stuff on campus. How are the facilities holding up after Irma? Any damage on campus that you guys found out after it passed through?
Everything looks to be in pretty decent shape right now. I mean, obviously there's little things here and there, and there's some things that may not even have been discovered yet. But my office looks out over the stadium, and there's some signage that's had an issue, and I see a couple of little pieces of aluminum in the stadium that look like they got blown out. But I'm thinking for the most part we did okay. Like there's nothing just obvious major damage, but of course everybody's going to make sure that all the structures are safe before we allow people back in, all those sorts of things.
How long do you think that takes? Like just like a day or two to assess and then all that kind of stuff?
It's a great question because our folks on campus that are responsible for that are responsible for the entire campus. So That's a great question that I don't have the answer to.
No, that's all right. How about the? So I know that Coach Frost and everybody, at least on the football side, they let the players go to get to their families. With the storm kind of bearing down. How are the players? And some of them left, some of them didn't. But how are the players and the staff doing as a whole? Any stories that you're hearing coming out from around the state? Some of the folks that went home.
Haven't heard too many of the stories of the folks coming home or that went home just yet, because a lot of them haven't even made it back yet. I know Coach Frost thought that hopefully by tomorrow we'll have most of the roster back, but when they resume practice tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised to see a handful of guys still not out there. I do know, there's a few kids on the team that are from South Florida whose families had come to Orlando for the Memphis game, and then just hunkered down with their family members here in Orlando, and we're anxious to know how things went back in South Florida with their homes and maybe some other family and that sort of thing. So that was fortunate in that regard, that some of the folks that probably needed to get out of South Florida were already out and were able to just stay here. So I've heard a couple of stories along those lines, but that's. Yeah, we're fortunate. That seems like from a standpoint of everybody's health and safety, that all sounds to be in pretty good shape.
That's good. Yeah, because I remember as we go back to Thursday night, I want to ask you about how just kind of get a tick-tock of what happened with the Memphis game first, because Thursday night I actually went back and I looked at the National Hurricane Center's forecast, and when Memphis was flying in to play the game it was obviously moved up from Saturday to Friday, and then they were flying in on Thursday night, and when they came in, they saw that last advisory. This thing looked like it was going to go right down our throats, and we didn't know how strong it would be when it got here. So take me back to Thursday night and into Friday morning. How did everything go down with the decision to finally call off the Memphis game?
Yeah, I'm not privy to all of the details. The one thing I know that may have played a factor into this, I know Danny was on the radio earlier today and mentioned this. They were in the air when Governor Scott's announcement about all state universities and schools and all that closing. And I think, there's potential that had a little bit of a factor in the decision. And, ultimately, really what it came down to was trying to make sure that everybody was safe. And who called who and how things went down, I'm not, that's above my pay grade. And quite honestly, I don't need to know. But basically, that was what we felt like why we moved the game to Friday earlier in the week, is we thought, okay, well, if we want to make sure everybody can be safe and Memphis can get back out and all that sort of thing, then looks like Friday would be okay. But you're right, that forecast changed and governor's announcement, and I think it was just a lot of little things. And again, in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot of people who are disappointed that there wasn't a football game. But in the grand scheme of things, everybody's health and safety and the all the folks that were going to need to be here on campus late that night to prepare for the storm coming in, all those sorts of things, really have to take precedence.
Yeah, and that's what I thought about that too. Is it really is, at the end of the day, it's just a football game, and the primary objective is to make sure that anybody, first of all, if anybody who's coming down here for a football game, get out of here, and go make yourself at home in a place where we know you're going to be away from where all the chaos might be happening. One question that I saw kind of pop up a little bit, and I wanted to know if you knew anything about it, was there any discussion that you were aware of or anybody else aware of about maybe moving the Memphis game up maybe to Thursday, or maybe trying to play it on a later date in the season? Were there any options? What sort of options may have been discussed based on what you know?
There were a lot of scenarios discussed, but really where it landed was Friday was the day that it had to be done. Just if you're Memphis and you've got to fly down now on Wednesday, now you've lost your potentially lost your Wednesday practice. You've certainly lost the Thursday practice. Or you're playing the game on Thursday, but you probably lost your Wednesday practice. Now you're shortening the week even more. Now you're talking about game prep and Anytime you're playing a game on really short prep, now you're increasing the risk for injuries, those sorts of things. That's just speculation on my part. I just know, if I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of them. But really, like I said, there were all kinds of scenarios being discussed, and really where it landed was this needed to be Friday and as early as possible if we were going to be able to get it in. And as we all know, unfortunately, we weren't able to get it in.
So when we look at the schedule ahead and we're thinking, okay, this is a conference game, and that's going to be, in the grand scheme of things, and we'll get to the Georgia Tech game in a second, but in the grand scheme of things, like these conference games obviously are so important, and I know UCF and Memphis have gotten a lot of help from the American in trying to figure out as many different possibilities or options that both teams can get, because obviously in the grand scheme of things, like you were saying, unimportant world of football, this could be a rather important game. So when you look at the schedule, Erica and I were looking at, okay, we were kind of playing around and saying, okay, how would we try and make a phone call if we were in charge of this? And we saw, September 30th, UCF's got Maine, Memphis has it at home, Memphis is on the road at Georgia State. And Eric brought up a good point, like thinking back to when Florida and LSU happened last year, where they were able to trade some dates around to make that game happen post Matthews. So any possibility, maybe September 30th, or maybe during not championship week, but maybe the week after, possibly making the game up. Any possibility on that? Maybe based on what you know.
There's all kinds of scenarios still being discussed.
Okay.
That's the best I can tell you, and I've heard the September 30th one kicked around a lot. What you got to keep in mind there is that's two or three, if you include Memphis, schools that all have to go. Yeah, let's do that, and it's not it's not as simple as just going, oh well, let's just move all these puzzle pieces around. There's a lot of logistics to all that, and but yeah, there's all kinds of scenarios that are still being discussed in any way, shape, or fashion to try to get us another game or two.
Just real quick, because I don't think a lot of fans truly understand or appreciate this. Give us like a little bit of a taste of what kind of logistics are you talking about? Because I think people unfortunately just think, make a couple phone calls and it happens. But there's a lot of moving parts associated with making something as complicated as this happens. So what are some of the things behind the curtain that you can tell us about, that need to be worked out in a situation like this?
Well, so the example you gave me, let's talk about the September 30th example, right?
Right.
Like I said, you've got to get all parties that are involved to agree to that. You got to look at Georgia State and say, okay, Georgia State, you had Memphis coming in. Now we're going to ask you to have Maine come in, and what does that do to their ticket sales? Now you've got charter flights that people need to either book or rebook, hotel rooms for the team, and these are just the high-level things. If you're asking teams to change their plans on a fairly short notice, some of those things can be done, but again, it's got to make sense for everybody involved. You look at it from the standpoint of, I wear my black and gold glasses all the time, and I look at different situations and scenarios, and I go, oh, that would be great. We can do that.
Right.
We can. Can somebody else, or does somebody else want to? And is it best for them and for their team? So there's, like I said, just lots and lots of logistics and moving parts and pieces to any of those discussions.
All right, so let's talk about the Georgia Tech game. This, I guess if you were going to, at gunpoint, you would probably say if we have to lose one of these two games, only one of the two games, obviously the Georgia Tech one being a non-conference game is a little bit logistically easier to sort of deal with down the road. But tell me about how based on what information you know, how the Georgia Tech decision was made.
Well, so quite honestly, and I heard Danny say this morning. We administratively over here, we were quite honestly way more concerned about the Georgia Tech game than the Memphis game, even prior to the Memphis game getting called, because it's a lot easier to play a game in the lead up to a storm when there's no damage, there's no power outages. There's no, concerns from those regards. So even in the time leading up to the Memphis game, there was a real concern about the Georgia Tech game, not knowing what the damage was going to be like, what the effect was going to be. And as you mentioned, again, it looked like that thing was coming right at us. So there was some concern about that one, even back further. Mm-hmm. Really, what it ultimately boiled down to was with our team getting released and a good portion of the roster not being there and not knowing when they'd be able to come back, turning around and trying to practice 1 day, 2 days, that sort of thing, and then play a game is difficult. Then you add in the fact that we agreed to let the National Guard go ahead and stage here when the governor asked for that, which is certainly something that we're proud to be able to help with. Then there's all the little bits and pieces of it. This is somebody said to me the other day, it's kind of like death by 1,000 duck bites, which I'd never heard before, but there's just so many of these little things that trickle down that affect your ability to host a football game. Power outages. There, as of yesterday, I'm not sure what the number is today, but as of yesterday, there were still close to 1 million people, and when I got that update, I was one of them in the Central Florida region that didn't have power. Yeah. We bring in people from all over the region and really all over the state to help us run a football game with gas shortages and power outages and all those sorts of things. Can we even be assured that those people can get here and can get here safely? There's just so many of those little bits and pieces that all have to come together to make a game happen that, the person that's not behind the scenes or intimately involved with these games doesn't fully grasp. I give our facilities crew and our marketing folks and all the event staff, all those people such great credit because before I got into this business, I was one of those people that I showed up to a game and I thought that wow, this just, I didn't even think about it. It just felt like, well, this magically happens, Yeah. But it's a huge undertaking. I mean, for instance, we have a meeting on Tuesday mornings before a Saturday home game that is basically our operations meeting for that whole Saturday. There's over 100 people in that meeting, including first responders, fire rescue, law enforcement, emergency management, all those people. I don't know how many of those people would have even been able to be in that meeting on Tuesday. So now you're pushing that meeting back and still trying to determine who all can be here. Like I said, there's just a lot of logistics and moving parts to these things.
Yeah, I mean, how many police officers do you see just administering traffic on a regular game on a Saturday, right? There's dozens of them that are out there. Just think about them alone.
So I think back to my neighborhood, for instance, where I live. Up until yesterday at whatever time, 5, 6 o'clock, we didn't have power. Yeah. So from the time power went out to the time I got power back, there was a police officer sitting at the corner of the two major roads that intersect near my neighborhood, basically just making sure that the intersection was safe. That's one police officer that may or may not have been needed at a game, that if that power's still out, he's still over there doing that, let alone the amount of hours that they're putting in doing all that stuff. I'm sure there's extra patrols in the areas where power's out, where they don't have any street lights and those sorts of things. So, and that's just the law enforcement component.
Yeah, because I know that we pull from not just Orange and Seminole and Orlando proper, and but there's also the state troopers, there's Brevard, there's a lot of places that suffered a lot more damage. So getting back to the Georgia Tech game, I know here's another question that I got from a number of people was, what alternate sites were considered or date possibilities discussed? Possibly, for example, Camping World Stadium. Someone even threw out Orlando City Soccer Stadium, which I know is probably not all that prepared to host a college football game, given goalposts and all that kind of stuff. Or maybe what about switching the game to Atlanta? And then Georgia Tech comes down here when they're scheduled to play, when we're scheduled to play them again in 2020. So what sort of alternate sites or date possibilities, based on for the Georgia Tech game, were kind of thrown out there, and which ones didn't, and why they didn't work?
Sure, I know. Like I said, I mean, in all of this stuff, there were numerous scenarios and possibilities discussed. But what this ultimately comes down to is there was no way, once our team was released to go be with their families, there was no way to know when they'd be able to get back or when they'd be able to start practicing again. We're practicing on Thursday, and again, like I said, I'm not even sure that we'll have a full roster on Thursday at practice. So really beyond any of that stuff, like I said, every possibility, every scenario that could be talked through, I'm sure was. But what it really comes down to is there wasn't much chance we were going to be able to prepare a team to play a game once they were released.
So as far as the series, Georgia Tech being, again, back to the relatively unimportant discussion of football, Georgia Tech, we're scheduled to play them in Atlanta at Bobby Dodd in 2020. September 19th, I think, is the date. Is that in question now? Like, what's the or is there a possibility that the UCF could make up that date with Georgia Tech in the non-conference schedule in the future?
Probably way too early to know, Jeff.
Okay.
There's so many other things that are taking up time over here right now that probably way too early to know. But as soon as we have any of those sorts of details, of course we'll share them. But there's still a contract for that game, as you say, in 2020. That I would again, it's just too early to know on any of those sorts of things. But I've not heard anything that would lead me to believe that game isn't going to happen or anything.
Gotcha. All right. So as far as this year's schedule is concerned, we came in 7 home games, 5 road games, which is kind of nice. But we're down 2 home games this year. So what do we know right now about what may be done for season ticket holders and single game ticket holders? Because I know that they're kind of standing there saying, hey, there goes 2 of our home games, including 2 marquee home games against some marquee opponents.
Well, so I don't know if this would have been known on your show when you play this interview back, but you and I both know I was late for this interview. The reason I was late for this interview is I was in a meeting, and I was in a meeting for close to 2 hours, and this is all the stuff that was being discussed. There's so many possible scenarios, so many things that we're trying to look at right now as ways to handle these situations. There's any number of scenarios right now. So really what we're asking for is for our fans to be patient. We've heard them. We know all the frustrations. We know all the disappointments. Hey, nobody's more disappointed than we are that we're facing 2 straight weeks without football here at Spectrum Stadium. Danny was on the radio this morning with Mike Bianchi and mentioned that this is potentially I think he used the word Armageddon for his budget.
Yeah.
There's revenue considerations to all this sort of thing when you lose 2 home games. So all those concerns, we've heard them, and we're talking through all kinds of different ways that we can address these situations.
I'd imagine that probably also includes like figuring out what we can do in the current bye week right now too, right?
Lots and lots. I hate to sound like a broken record. Lots and lots of scenarios.
Cool. Well, I know this. Like I said, to be honest, let's face it. There's literally nothing about this entire situation that doesn't at least somewhat suck. But like I said, you guys have been, busting your tails since before the storm to try and figure out all the logistics and everything. And this is not easy, but I know that you guys are working hard on it. I know we'll have, like I said, some more. I know that the university and the athletic department will have a lot more answers for the fans as in due time. So, real quick, Andy, just before we go, where can fans stay tuned to in order to know the latest about what's going on and what some of the next steps are for UCF?
Sure. We always try to do a great job of making sure that information's on our website. As you know, UCFKnights.com. Encourage people to keep track of things there. Obviously, social media is a big way to share news right now. So follow UCF Knights on Twitter, like our Facebook page, all those sorts of things. And of course, fans are always welcome to call the ticket office if they have questions about tickets, 407-823-1000. But yeah, we're doing our best, and we send emails to our season ticket holders on occasion and try to keep them informed that way. So we really do our best to try to over communicate to our fans, and we'll continue to do that throughout the course of the next few weeks and months. With regard to the football season, with regard to any of these situations that we're talking about, and really with regard to all our sports. I mean, we got a great basketball season coming up, a really exciting, potentially, basketball season coming up for both the men and the women. We'll be in touch about all those sorts of things, and again, just bear with us.
Cool, Andy. Well, hey, listen, pass along on behalf of myself and Eric and Brian and Derek, please pass along our best to all the staff over there, Dave Hansen, Danny White, all the coaches and everybody. We're glad everybody made it through okay, and here's to eventually seeing some UCF football, hopefully sooner rather than later, to try and get our minds off of this disaster. So thanks again, Andy. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, Jeff, no doubt. Let's go get Maryland next week, and then we'll see where we go from there.
You got it, man. Thanks again to Andy, by the way. So thankful for his time and insight. And, like I told Andy, it's like there's nothing about this that doesn't suck in some way, right? I mean, I think a lot of people think that, it's not that hard to put on a football game. Let me tell you something. When resources get limited, as they have been this week, I'm still going on 72 hours without power myself. There were police out in front of the major intersections in front of our house because power lights were out just yesterday. You're going to try and put on a football game with all that. It's just not going to happen. And I wish that fans would step back and just listen for a second and say, hey, okay, these people are experts at their job. All right. They know how to handle these situations, and this is a true situation that's unprecedented. They have a certain set of priorities that they are going to make, and the coaches also are going to put their players first. I mean, whether we like it or not, I mean, it's just football. It's just football. There are more important things that need to be taken care of.
And it's just a Georgia Tech game. Like, people got to get over this. Like, people are acting like this was some sort of national title game. Like, this is some marquee, biggest game. Like, it wasn't. It was Georgia Tech. Here's the thing. Let me ask all these people. Let me ask you this. Does not playing Georgia Tech cost UCF a shot at the national title?
No.
No, they don't. They would have never had a shot for the national title, even if they beat Georgia Tech 100-0. Does not playing Georgia Tech cost UCF a chance of winning the American Conference?
Doesn't matter.
Nope. So what the hell are we complaining about here? What are we talking about?
Right.
I mean, I get it. I get it that it's not easy. You're getting quote unquote Power 5 conferences, your home game, and this or that. I've said this in a past episode, and people got mad at me about this comment, and that's fine. But I've said this again. If everything would have gone normal, the Georgia Tech game would have gone. The Miami-Florida State game would have been still played this weekend. It had originally been scheduled. Florida-Tennessee. This game would not have packed the house. And I know people get upset about that comment, but it wouldn't. Because I know for a fact, I know people that normally go to UCF games that were not going to go to that game because they were going to go to the Florida game, or they were going to, or others that were going to go to the Florida State-Miami game. So chill. It ain't the end of the world on that. And I also believe this. Let's say hypothetically they would have scheduled this game Saturday. I don't think they would have packed the house either, because I've talked to people that have tickets that can't go because they're trying to figure out where the hell is they're going to be living in the next foreseeable future.
Yeah, because we still have power out. We still have damage to a bunch of homes. And I think it's unfortunate that, we have there are some social media pundits, shall we say, who see the world only through their lens and their Twitter feed, and are unable to peek up from their laptops and see what's going on in other places around them. So, and that's unfortunate, but I give UCF a ton of credit because, any solution that they come up with is not going to please everybody. They have to try and make the most people the most happy that they possibly can, but that doesn't mean they can make everybody happy. So,
and by the way, I don't think UCF real thrilled at how this turned out. It's not they're not benefiting from this. In fact, Danny White was on this morning on Open Mic with Mike Bianchi, and he acknowledged right now they're kind of in a very bad situation financially for the athletic department because of it.
from my chair, this is Armageddon. This is worst case scenario. We had been planning for the last 8 months on these 2 home games and hoping that we would look good and excite our fans in the game against FIU, and I think we did that. Our young offense really showed some major progress, and so we were expecting some significant single game revenue surges for both Memphis and Georgia Tech, and we're just kind of scrambling right now trying to figure out what that means. It's certainly not a good scenario for us, and just seeing online a little bit on Twitter, I know we've had fans frustrated. I just ask folks to be patient and just remember the last person in the world that would have not wanted to play, wouldn't have wanted this to happen is this guy, because I'm the one that has to figure out this budget now, and that's a lot of lost revenue for us. So we're trying to make the best of a tough situation, but again, the most important thing is we are able to be a resource for our community, and by hosting the National Guard here and all the great work that they're doing. So we're happy to be a part of the solution as it relates to clean up from the storm.
All right, and here's the thing, Jeff. It's not like this was this was not the end all be all. This is not like, hey, let's just cancel these games. No problem. They're going to have some financial issues. They're going to have some issues with people that have season tickets. They're going to have issues with people that have tickets to Georgia Tech. I mean, they've got some issues here. So believe me, this was not like a calculated, conceived plan or whatever. I don't.
It's also not a situation where UCF didn't, just said people. There are people out there who are saying like UCF was like, well, screw the fans. They didn't even try. That's such BS. That's such complete BS. I mean, don't these people understand that?
Well, let's address a couple things here because so we've addressed why their game's not being played at UCF. Mm-hmm. I think though the main thing that we gathered from your interview with Andy and in fact. Let's play Scott Frost. Scott Frost was on this morning with Mark Daniels on the Beat of Sports. And he addressed the fact of, hey, my players want to be with their families, and that's going to affect the scheduling as far as practice and everything.
2 days ago, we had about less than 60% of our guys here, and yesterday we're getting close to having 3/4 of our team back. Decisions have to be made, and they have to be made ahead of time when you don't really know what's going to happen with anything. So, I felt like we could have got the game in Friday, but people more important than me against Memphis, people more important than me decided it wasn't safe, and I certainly don't blame them because people had to make arrangements for the storm coming. Once that game was canceled, it was really hard with the biggest storm on record headed right for Florida. It was really hard for us to say, you guys have to stay here and you can't go be with your families. So once we made the decision to cancel that game, we kind of had to make the decision to let our players do what was best for them and their family. And realistically, once a huge part of our roster left to be with family and get to safe places, trying to get them back after the hurricane in time to prepare for this game, wasn't very realistic, and we're doing the best we can to get everybody back and try to get onto a routine. But it's hard to criticize those decisions when a storm that size is coming this way.
All right, and so as we recorded this, Jeff, because Scott Frost did his night talk show at Burger U Wednesday night, they still don't have their entire team together. I don't believe their first practice won't be till Thursday.
Right.
By the way, since nobody's aware of this, the school is still not open. The school is not open until Monday.
Well, classes don't open until Monday. The personnel staff can come back on Friday.
Correct. But, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here. So this team wasn't going to be able to practice that much. Do you really want to send your team out to play a game not prepared? Because here's my question. Let's say they would have played Georgia Tech in Atlanta, right? Because that's one of the suggestions that have been floated out there or wherever. Let's say they would have gotten everybody back. They get a practice in, maybe one or two. By the way, against an offense that you talk to anybody in the sport tells you that you need as much practice time as you get just to prepare for it, which is not easy because you don't see this offense. It's not like you practice this offense in practice normally. It's a very unusual offense. Nobody runs it except Georgia Tech, Navy, ironically. So what if they would have said, yeah, let's go play, even if we only have one practice or two practices, let's say, right? Let's just do what the fans want and play. And they get out and they play You and I are blogging, and Brian Murphy's blogging, and they're getting gashed. And they're getting gassed 10, 20 yards. And one of us makes the comment, man, they don't look like a team that's prepared to play this defense.
Well, of course not.
Well, then what? What do we say then? So if that happens, are we going to give them a break and say, hey, look, they didn't have a lot of time practice? Or are we going to rip them? See, I think fans can't have it both ways. You want to play the game? Okay. But what if they don't play well? Do you want to win the game? There's a big difference there. And I think fans try to eat their cake and eat it too. And I don't think that's really fair. If you wanted them to play this game at Georgia Tech and with not a lot of prep time, that's fine. But you can't criticize them if they don't perform very well either. Yeah. They're not professionals. They're not NFL players. So to me, that's the thing I don't get why people are upset. Like, you really want to play this game and take the loss? Because you would have probably lost this game. There's a chance you would have lost this game even if you had a full week of practice, let alone 1 or 2 practices. So I really don't understand at all what people wanted here. Like, it's pretty clear cut. The team was released so they can be with their families, and most of them haven't been back completely. They weren't going to get a lot of practice time in, so why are you going to go ahead and play in Atlanta and get beat? And then you get banged up, and now all of a sudden you got to go to Maryland. And then all of a sudden things can kind of snowball. Sometimes you put things in priority.
I think one of the things, though, that I kind of understand the fans' frustration is, well, what if you weren't playing Georgia Tech? What if you were playing a team that had a more vanilla offense? Would the game then be played?
Maybe not. Who knows? We'll never know.
I don't think that's the case at all. And I think that there's another thing at play here. And Jemias Pittman from UCF actually sent out a pretty interesting tweet. It was in reaction to some folks on Georgia Tech, on the Georgia Tech side, who started. It was someone named JJ Green saying, LOL, UCF didn't want any part of the triple O being the triple option. And then a guy, Twitter handle 3 Stripes from it said, sent out a bunch of crying emojis to Jemias Pittman, to which Jemias Pittman on Twitter answered just one word: ignorance. And I think what Jemias is saying is, listen, you guys have no idea what we're going through right now. You guys have no idea what is going on in terms of us trying to get trying to first of all help out our family and friends, and then try and get our team back together. If you think that we canceled this game because we're trying to duck you because we didn't get enough time to practice for the triple O, for the triple option, you're full of it. And I say good on Jemias Pittman for saying that.
And by the way, for people that, why did Scott Frost let the players go? First of all, you got to believe, you know this very well. I'm sure there was conversations that took place between the coaches and the players. And if the players tell you, Jeff, and you know this as a parent, if the players are telling you, I need to be with the family where there's some things I'm concerned about, what are you going to say? What are you going to say?
Right.
And by the way, I've made some phone calls, which I doubt a lot of these clowns on the message boards would think have all the answers. I've actually made phone calls. I've made phone calls to people at LSU who have dealt with this. I've called people at Houston who have just recently, by the way, dealt with this at Matthew. I've dealt with, and I've called other schools as well who have dealt with this. And I asked them specifically because I don't know. What's the protocol for a coach in a situation like this? Do they release their players or they don't release their players? And everybody to a man said it's up. First of all, it's up to the coach. Everybody's different. Every scenario is different. The majority of them, though, do let their players go.
Yeah,
they do. And I think that's an important statement to be made, Jeff, that people are acting like a lot of teams don't do that. That is not true. A lot of schools do that. LSU, for example, does not. They prefer that the players stay on campus. Now, part of the reason for that is in a hurricane situation, anybody that's been to Louisiana, you're better off being in Baton Rouge on campus than you are, say, in New Orleans where you could be underwater.
Or anywhere else south of Baton Rouge, for that matter.
And that's the other thing. Brian Norcross has said this for many years. The reason there's evacuations is not because of wind, but it's because of water. You won't survive water. So places like LSU, for example, they're much defensive. That being said, for example, Major Applewhite, who's the head coach at Houston, he let his players be with their families. That's why they didn't play the game opener against Texas San Antonio, because there was a lot of legitimate concern about their families and well-being. So look, Florida State and Miami aren't playing either. Now, the ACC was creative in finding a way to make that work, where they pushed that game back to October 7th and make all the parties work out. But, Miami wasn't going to be able to play this weekend. FIU, by the way, as we're recording this, Jeff, I'm not even joking. As we're recording this, just landed from to Miami for the first time, I think since I don't know when. Like they were hanging out in Birmingham. FAU just arrived. They played it. They had to hang out in Wisconsin after playing games there. So there's just a lot of logistics that things kind of go from there. Now people are going to bring up, well, Florida's playing this weekend. Yeah. If you watch Jim McElwain's press conference this earlier on Wednesday, I've never seen a coach so somber in my life. You would have thought, trust me, he ain't real thrilled that this game's being played. Now, Gainesville, for people who have been there, what they did, they let their players go, but their families were already up to Gainesville because a lot of them left to go to Gainesville. Mm-hmm. So every situation's different. And I'm never going to criticize a coach if he's going to put his players first over a football game. I mean, I really hope that we don't get to that point. Yeah,
I think the bottom line is there's a lot of perspective that's needed right now. And I don't envy, but I don't envy the situation that UCF's administration is in, but I do think that Scott Frost made the right call in this particular case. And we know that, Scott's the kind of guy who would make this kind of a call and put his players and their families first. Here's
the thing. And Scott Frost has said this. There's a lot of decisions here that were made that were above his head and above Danny White's head. I think there was a lot of administrative decisions here. When the governor of your, the state calls you and says, hey, we need your facilities. What are you going to say? No?
Hey, we're taking over your stadium. Thanks.
There was a lot of, and I think that's part of sometimes, and this having worked there, if people above you are making decisions and things like that, you're not going to be told everything. So sometimes information doesn't come out as clean or things like that is concerned. And we both know that school very well. When the administrations take over, they're going to take over and do some things. So I don't think this was I don't think Scott Frost just kind of went on his own here. I think he talked to a bunch of people, and I think everybody was on the same page on this. I don't think this was one individual, but I think they had a sense of, hey, our players kind of are concerned about their well-being, family's well-being, and things like that. And we have time to, resolve this. See, and that's the irony of all this, Jeff, is if this game gets played against Memphis on Friday, maybe at that point the team stays together because there's not enough time. But because the game got canceled, that bought them an extra 24 to 36 hours to basically prepare.
Right.
It's just a domino effect of things that you just can't predict. You can't predict any of this stuff. It happened. It's not the end of the world. Just because you're playing 10 or 11 games isn't going to determine your season. I don't understand that. I've never understood that logic. I remember college football used to be an 11-game season. Used to be a 10-game season. In my opinion, they haven't lost games that are significantly damaging to the season. I'm not talking financially, obviously. This is going to hurt UCF, and I understand if you're a season ticket holder, you have questions. I think those are valid. Mm-hmm. But I think to suggest that somehow this game had to be played, no, really, not really. This is Georgia Tech, with all due respect, is just another program. Georgia Tech is the type of team that a lot of teams in the ACC worry about overlooking because they don't really take them seriously.
Right. Hey, let's take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll take a look at some of the other sports around on campus that have been affected by Irma. We'll just put a wrap on this show and finish up by talking about what's going on with football going on the way through. Stick around. We're back after this.
Hello, Night Nation. I'm Andrew Fegley.
And I'm Trey Strelko. Where are we? This isn't our usual spot.
It looks like we've landed in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those guys.
You know, Nightline has UCF sports covered.
Week in and week out, we bring you interviews with newsmakers and in-depth analysis of UCF sports.
Subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to subscribe to Nightline on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Nightline.
Trace, can we go back to the 1148 studios now and start working on our next all-new Nightline?
How do we get out of here? Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now back to you guys in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez with you here. Some updates on some other sports in addition to football. Let's update the schedule here. Volleyball. Their match that was originally scheduled against Virginia, their home opener this Friday, September 15th, 7 p.m., that is happening. That is happening at the venue. Schedule change was originally they were scheduled to play Ole Miss on Sunday. Ole Miss is not down here in Florida. They decided not to make the trip. So UCF is playing two matches against Virginia. The originally scheduled 7 p.m. Friday night match, and then 1 o'clock on Saturday, UCF and Virginia once again to sort of make Virginia whole from this tournament as well. So that is the schedule with UCF volleyball. Women's golf is still scheduled to play up at Vandy this weekend. We also have men's golf is going to be heading up to Connecticut for Hartford. There's some other updates as well that we wanted to pass along. Women's soccer right now 4-1 and climbing in the polls. They have had 3 games wiped off the schedule. Friday, September 8th against LSU at home, called off. Sunday, September 10th at FIU, canceled. And now Friday, September 15th at home against Florida Gulf Coast, also canceled. Their next scheduled game is at Cincinnati to start the conference regular season on September 21st. That's a Thursday. That's at Cincinnati. Their next scheduled home game is scheduled for September 28th. That's a Thursday against Tulsa. So we've seen the schedule just wreak absolute havoc on UCF women's soccer, whose last home game was on August the 25th. They will not play a home game for more than a month because of the storm. So if you're telling me that the storm didn't impact much, I got news for you. It did. Men's soccer schedule looks like this. They are 1-2-1. They had their Tuesday game against Florida International. Coach Scott Calabrese's old team would have been his home debut. That game was officially postponed on Tuesday, September the 12th. This is in addition to what was supposed to be their home opener back on September the 1st. That was canceled due to bad weather, not because of a hurricane, but because of thunder and lightning and the like. They are still at the moment scheduled to play at Florida Gulf Coast in Fort Myers on Tuesday, September 19th. But who knows what may happen with that game because it's down in Southwest Florida. We know how bad the devastation was down there, particularly in the Marco Island, Naples area, which is just south of Fort Myers. Their next, and then after that, it's Saturday, September 23rd at USF. Friday, that's the conference opener. Friday, September 29th at SMU in Dallas. Next home game is scheduled for Wednesday, October the 4th against Stetson at 7 p.m. Can you believe this, Eric? UCF men's soccer has not played a home regular season game yet. They've had both home dates wiped because of weather. And their home opener will not be until, at the very least, Wednesday, October 4th.
That's wild, man. That is just wild. That is wild. By the way, a salute to them, by the way, getting the result against nationally ranked West Virginia.
Yeah, a scoreless draw up in Morgantown, and they were also really appreciative of the folks in Morgantown for putting them up while the storm passed through town and giving them safety as well. And also credit to the folks at Central Arkansas who housed the UCF volleyball team up there after that tournament finished over the weekend. They took care of Todd Dagenet and his squad, putting them up for the weekend while the storm passed on through. UCF got a split in that Central Arkansas Classic in 4 matches, 2-2 wins against Central Arkansas and Southern, and that leads to the Virginia match as well. So, man, what a week this has been for UCF. But you know, again, we encourage everybody to do is just keep an eye right here on Black and Gold Banneret for all the latest that's going to be coming up, because UCF is right now, like we mentioned in our earlier interview with Andy Seeley, trying to figure out what to do with those two home games that we've now lost for football, trying to get one more back on the schedule. And you get the sense based on what Andy said in his interview with me, what Danny White said to Mike Bianchi, what Scott Frost said to Mark Daniels, that, look, we're going to fight like hell to try and make everybody whole here as best we can. It's a situation where it's just hard. But what they're asking for, and what I think we as fans, kind of we should be able to grant to them, and we kind of do owe them, is a little bit of patience. And I would hope that the good that the UCF fans out there recognize that and give UCF administration the little bit of grace that they should have in order to make all this happen. And one last thing before, sorry, Eric, I know you wanted to make one more point.
Yeah.
All those people out there on Twitter and on the message boards complaining that they're going to give up their season tickets because of this. I got a better idea. How about you give your season tickets to me? Okay. And what I will do with them is I will give them to every National Guard member I can find in Central Florida who's helping people out. Every first responder, every guy who's come in from out of state to help us out with restoring power here, not just in Central Florida, but throughout the state. You don't want your season tickets anymore? Fine. No problem. You know what? I'll pass them out to people who actually deserve them. Because if that's how you feel about, again, it's college football. These guys are not pros. If that's how you feel about it, then you know something, as far as I'm concerned, you lose your fan card, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it drives me nuts when I see that kind of attitude towards fans, with a school that's been dealt a really bad deck of cards right here, through no fault of their own, through absolutely no fault of their own. It drives me absolutely nuts.
Agreed. A couple things.
Yep.
For all you, because I've seen people try to come up and think they're like a schedule maker. Hey, let's move this game here, and this team can move their home game here, and that. First of all, stop it. You don't know what you're doing. I saw somebody suggested, well, why can't they move the UCF Navy game, for example, to October 28th, because both teams have a bye, and then UCF could play this Memphis on the 21st, and Memphis can move the game they had on the 20th. First of all, if I'm Navy, why would I do that? Why would I want to move my schedule? That's going to affect my people and my season tickets. And now you're asking 2 or 3 other teams to adjust their schedules. That's the problem. It's not that simple. I saw somebody else suggest, well, why couldn't they have just moved the Maryland game to this weekend? Because Maryland has a bye week, and that could have created a bye. Maryland's not going to move up to. My point is, the only way you can move games is try to keep it as simple as possible. For example, what the ACC was able to do with Florida State and Miami is they found a date, October 7th, where both teams were available. And what they did, they put them in that date, and then they moved the Miami-Georgia Tech game, which was scheduled for Thursday the 12th. They just moved it to the 14th, so that way Miami didn't have to play on a short wet. That worked out very nicely. That's not the case in some of these cases with the UCF situation. So for people that are trying to make these schedules and multiple games and change all these teams, a lot of and you brought this up with Andy, and you brought up the September 30th idea with Memphis, which I've heard and I've discussed. But even that one is flawed, because the problem with that one is you're asking Georgia State to give up a home game there. Why, if I'm Georgia State, why am I giving up a home game against Memphis so I can play Maine, for example? Right. It doesn't make any sense. So you got to pay them money. See, the thing about Florida and LSU, and you brought that up, and I have brought up the comparison, the reason why that worked was, first of all, the conference forced it to work.
Yeah.
Number one, because they got money. Okay, which, oh, by the way, we don't have, which is something that some people forget this stuff too. They were able to buy out Florida's game against Presbyterian. So they bought out Presbyterian. LSU bought out South Alabama, and that opened the date, and they agreed to play at LSU. That's what happened there.
Yeah, they took the money out of Paul Feinbaum's salary. Is what they did.
There you go. And that's something that people forget too, by the way, because I know people suggest, well, how's Florida playing? Keep this in mind. Florida's and the LSU's and the Florida State have a lot more resources, a lot more things they can use in their available than a UCF does. That's just reality. So as a result, for Florida, it's a lot easier to play, move things around than it is for a UCF. UCF can't just open a check, or the American Conference for that matter can't open a check. The ACC can move a Thursday night game on ESPN to Saturday. It's not going to hurt them in the wallet like it would for the American Conference, for example. So, again, people need to make that sense. And I'll make this other point. We'll see if there's some tweaking on the schedule. If the games are not remade, all right, let's say UCF Memphis is done, is not going to be played, and USF in Connecticut is not played. I actually think that works in the UCF's favor because USF had a much easier schedule on paper than UCF, and I think UCF can make up some ground in that regard, which to me, if I'm a fan, I care more about, do I win the conference? Does this hurt my chances of winning the conference or the division and those things? Not worried about, geez, do I not play, Georgia Tech or specifics, things like that. So there's a lot of variables to that. A little note here, this is very interesting. I want to ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
You know that Georgia Tech right now has a bye week is October 7th, okay?
Yeah.
You know who else has a bye week that weekend?
Well, not us.
No, UCF is at Cincinnati that weekend.
No. Who has the bye week?
South Florida.
Hmm.
So here's an interesting question. If you're South Florida, you just lost a game with Connecticut, right? Do you add that game on the schedule? If you're Georgia Tech, do you add that game on the schedule, or do you go in a different direction? Just something to look for down the road if that happens or not. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I found that interesting that those two teams have the same bye week now, and we'll see if that happens or not. UCF and we've played audio, obviously October 28th, and I would be the target. I would assume if UCF adds a game. I think we both agree, Jeff, if they add a game, odds are it's going to be an FCS opponent. Would you agree with that?
I think that would be the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
So
I just don't see a scenario where I would be surprised at this point if a Memphis got rescheduled. I just don't, unless the conference is willing to reshuffle things and agitate other schools' schedules. Mike Oresco, I think, made a comment about that. I just don't think he wants to do that. There's a rippling effect to a lot of these things if you do that. So
yeah.
I think everything will be fine long term. I think people just got to get over it. It's done with. I would have liked the game to have been played either here or in Atlanta. I would have been fine. It isn't. So you move on. I'm getting ready to go up to Maryland next week. That's the next game. And I think that's what should be the focus is how does this team react and respond now after a long layoff, Jeff? We'll get into more next week. This team is going to basically start over here going up to Maryland, a team that's much improved, but they have their own issues because they lost their starting quarterback for the year. So the season is long from being done. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of things at play. I think all the goals that UCF have in front of them are still in front of them, and I think people need to remember that. Worrying about a short-term thing like whether the Georgia Tech game gets played in 3 years or not. Who cares? I mean, seriously, I don't lose sleep over like Georgia Tech's of the world. It's not like Alabama was coming here. If Alabama was coming here, I would be probably a little bit more upset maybe or agitated or whatever. But it's Georgia Tech, which really doesn't do much for me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just don't. Not with what everything that's gone, what's happened.
Yeah. I think that, from my perspective, and I think we'll wrap on this, is that, if you want to get one back, that conference game, I think, is the one that you want to get back as much as possible.
Yeah, sure.
Because of how important it is to determining, what are the realistic goals for the team this year.
I will say this, though, Jeff. I think it's fine to get that Memphis game, but I think I would make the effort to play that game. But also USF has to play the Connecticut game in that scenario. I don't know if you can make one game up and not the other. I think if you're the conference, and I'm from a conference perspective, I think it's a question of, okay, either try to make up those two games or not. I don't know if you can pick one or the other because then that doesn't really solve a lot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Unless now, if you're talking from an economic standpoint, then yes, obviously that would be the scenario there. to try to make it work. Will it happen? I have no idea. Who knows? Time will tell. Let's just see what happens. And look, if UCF goes 9-1 and wins the conference, is anybody upset at that point?
Good point.
Then what? I mean,
to be honest with you, I've never seen so many people upset over a team that's undefeated currently on the year.
I'm just surprised by the outrage over the Georgia. I mean, it's Georgia Tech. I'm sorry. Maybe Georgia Tech hasn't been relevant. The only reason Georgia Tech has won ACC titles in recent years is because the ACC was bad. Let's not get carried away with wow, this powerhouse. It's it's not Notre Dame coming to town. It ain't Florida coming to town. It ain't Georgia coming to town. I mean, I think yes, would have loved to have seen the game, sure, but all things considered, if you made me this offer that we got to cancel this Georgia Tech game so your property can be okay and you can move forward, then yeah, I'll take that deal. Thanks.
Right. Well, as we finish up here on this wild and woolly episode of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, Eric, I will be at the volleyball match on Friday night doing PA for that first Virginia game.
All right.
Where will you be this weekend?
I might go there too, depending if I'm trying to fix some property in my house, if people don't mind. But if I can get that stuff done, and depending on scheduling stuff, I might try to join you for that actually and check out a little volleyball. But otherwise, I will be getting prepared to clean stuff up in the house and getting prepared for a trip to College Park, Maryland, ladies and gentlemen, next weekend. I'm looking forward to it.
That should be good. And I will be, like I said, that will be, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, that's true. That will be the first UCF sporting event post Irma. Will be UCF Volleyball, first on-campus sporting event post Irma. UCF Volleyball against Virginia on Friday at 7 p.m. at the venue, which is the old arena. So here's my challenge out to the UCF fans out there. Not happy about not going to the football game on Saturday? All right, let's see you show up to volleyball. Support UCF that way. So that's my hope, that they get a good crowd out there, and it'll be against an ACC opponent. So that's my hope, that we'll get a good crowd out for that one, and kind of gain a little bit of normalcy. In the meantime, I'm hoping that you're cleaning up. You have power. I'm all cleaned up, but I don't have power. And I got to get out of my father-in-law's office before he kicks me out because he wants to go to bed. So, Eric, thanks again, brother. And good luck with the cleanup. And hopefully I'll see you on Friday night.
Sounds good.
All right, man. And thank you for listening. Night fans, like we said, on behalf of all of us here at blackandgoldbanneret.com, we hope that you are safe indeed, and that the storm was as minimal an inconvenience as humanly possible for you and your families out there. And we're looking forward to getting back to normal again, at least to some extent, this weekend. And, Eric, I know you share my sentiment on this, that, it does kind of suck that we don't have a little bit of football to get our minds off of just the craziness of this week, and kind of release from some of the stress that we've all been going through leading up to the storm and then during the storm. But, like I said, there's more important things, and football will be back soon enough. So thanks again, dude, and I'll talk to you soon, all right?
Sounds good.
All right, thanks to you, the fans, for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We will catch you again next week.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.